Good morning and welcome back to another Breakfast with Bill. Matt, good to have you back. Last week I was all by myself and I'm not nearly as good when I'm talking at a camera versus when I'm talking with you.
Well, it was funny because I think you gave the indication that I was on vacation, right? So there was a lot of people that texted me and said, "Where are you?" And it was funny. All week I was saying Bahamas, no, I'm in Jamaica, because I didn't know where it was coming from, and I finally put it together, Breakfast with Bill. But, yeah.
I guess that was a mistake. Matt was actually, I think we just had schedules that didn't collide. But welcome back, everybody. Thanks for being with us. And today we wanted to, I don't know.
Well,
talk about.
basically.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Talk about, communication and, I don't know. What's the word I'm looking for?
Sort of
like when you just try to communicate with impact, but you can't do it because we use filler words. And filler words like and and does that make sense? And you know what I mean? These are the type of phrases and words that we call imprecision language, right? We want to become masters of precision language. And it'll dramatically increase the impact of our communication, dramatically increase the way in which people see us and think about how knowledgeable we might be and how intelligent we might be overall.
Exactly. And for us, whenever we're coaching and talking about questions and more impactful questions and living in discovery, this without a doubt usually happens when people are a little bit unsure or asking a question that might be more bold than they're accustomed to. You water it down, and what happens? You take away the impact of the question, and it's distracting. It's downright distracting when you're talking to someone and they're using a lot of filler language. And then on the back half of the show, so I think it's about filler, the you know what I mean, the ums, the likes, the seriouslys, but also lack of precision from a lack of clarity, more, a lot, often, usually. I think of that might be on the outskirts, but needing to drill down, needing to clarify. So some of that imprecise meaning language as well that we can't fall trap to as salespeople. This usually happens. This happens a lot. More, less, cheaper, expensive. What does all that really mean?
Yeah, where do I find less on a number line, right? And when we do that, there's a couple reasons for it. We'll get into that a little bit. But the first thing we want to start with is that the filler words, the nervous tics almost, the words that we feel when we don't know what to say, the likes. You know, my son's girlfriend, Victoria, she said to me last night, because I always point this out to people, young people especially, she said, okay, I'm going to stop using the word like so much. So that's great. And a little bit later, we were FaceTiming with her as we were doing night prayer together, and she said like a few times, and I started just counting them on the screen like this. She said, stop, I'm starting tomorrow. And I thought that was pretty funny, but it's part of it is catching yourself to know that you're doing it. Matt and I talked about that early in your career. Mm-hmm. Right? And I forget, you had a filler phrase.
I had a couple.
Did you?
I had a couple. The one that I still use probably more often than I want to is when I end a sentence, right?
Yeah.
That's one that I use.
And right has become one of the word right. And I noticed myself doing this the other day. I gave a talk Saturday. I watched a replay of it yesterday. And I found myself using the word right more than I want at the end of sentences. Why do we do that? Why isn't what we said stand on its own? Why isn't that strong enough? Why do I feel, why do we feel like we have to add right? Almost questioning or getting people to buy in. So I never was aware that I was doing it that much until I saw myself on video doing it. But it's critical that, I think that's the first one, is if we want to increase in our precision language, if we want to increase the power of our communication, the first thing is to realize we're doing it. Mm-hmm. So part of that is giving people permission to let us know, right? Giving people around us permission to let us know when we're doing that so that we can be aware of that.
I think part of that awareness is when we do it. I actually have 5 different times where filler language becomes more pertinent. So obviously it's creating a thought. Mm-hmm. When we're thinking, some people like to say, well, I'm doing this, and and then finishing the thought. So it's one more formulating a thought. Don't worry about having silence. Don't worry about slowing down. It's okay to think. It's okay to pause, especially in sales and good communication in general. But we know as salespeople, silence is sometimes our friend.
Silence is sacred, man. We want to take that silence and embrace it, and we don't want to stifle it because silence is sacred.
So it's when we formulate a thought and we're buying time. Number 2, to make statements less harsh.
Softening language.
Yes. So basically, Bill, I don't like that outfit.
Basically drives me crazy, by the way. The
Sort of.
people that use the word basically at the beginning of sentences, what's it mean? Right? What does it really mean? And why are you using it? What's your intent? So rather than use these filler words, this filler language, embrace the intent. And like Matt said, don't worry about the softening of all of our statements. If you're one of these individuals who falls into the softening trap, don't take it as criticism that we're giving this to you, saying, hey, rethink this. The reason you're doing it is good. It's inherently good. You're a good person that wants to not intimidate others, that doesn't want to be harsh to others, that wants to be liked, right? That intent is good, but it's misplaced. You don't need to soften all of your statements because then we have all soft statements. What do we end up with? It's cotton candy language, right? So just as cotton candy dissolves when it hits the tongue, when we use cotton candy language, it dissolves when it hits the ear, and it's meaningless. So it might sound nice and sweet like cotton candy does, and it might even sound colorful like all those pretty pinks and yellows that you get with cotton candy. But as soon as it hits the ear, it dissolves because there's no substance to it.
Formulating a thought, make statements less harsh, to soften statements, like you said, to stall, and then finally to show an end of statements. Funny story with end of statements. Obviously, being from Pittsburgh, we might not notice it, but
Yin's guys might not know what that means in that, but that's a typical Pittsburgh sentence.
That's another story. But anyways, when I went to college, I had teammates that were recruited from everywhere, and we were one of the closest homes. So if we had a day off, we would all come back, and my mom would cook us dinner or whatever that might be. And it used to drive them crazy because I guess in Pittsburgh, to end a sentence, there's not really that doesn't feel final. Is it a statement? Is a question? So I would say like going to the mall. And my teammates would be like, wait, is that an end of a statement? Is that a question? What's going on here? Yeah. So that just made me think of it that I had to say like end a sentence, or that's a question, Dan. When I saw, you know what I mean, or does that make sense? So the fifth way is when we end a sentence. But so awareness is the first thing, and I believe you said something powerful. How often do we see ourselves recorded? Mm-hmm. I love doing Teams because you can record it. You can send it off because people usually are not as aware. They're like, oh, yeah, I say it a little bit. Mm-hmm. And something that I learned from you is making the ticks when you're interviewing someone. Are you open to an observation? You said, you know what I mean, 19 times in the last 3 minutes. People usually don't realize that they're saying in that much. So I think recording and getting that awareness is a great first step.
Yeah, it's funny you say that about interviewing. I'll never forget. I was interviewing a gentleman for one of our clients one day, and this had to be 4 or 5 years ago. And I mentioned to him, I said, hey, I'm picking up my daughter. She's in the car with me. Are you okay if we have this conversation? He said, yeah, I'm fine. I said, okay, great. So we're talking, and he used the word, I think he used the phrase, know what I mean. And that was his tick. So I put him on mute, and I said to my daughter, Gina, I said, get a piece of paper and a pencil. Make a little hash mark every time he says, know what I mean. And how many times do you think he said it in I think it was about a 30-minute interview? 39 times. And I said to him at the end of and this was not to be harsh to him, but it was to give him feedback and also see how coachable he was. And I said to him at the end, I said, can I give you some feedback? And he said, yeah. I said, do you know that you use the phrase, you know what I mean, a lot as a filler? And he's like, I don't know. Well, maybe I'm a little nervous today. I said, how many times do you think you said it? And he became very defensive and started to push back. He goes, I guess a lot since you're bringing it up to me.
You know what I mean?
Right. And I said, well, 39 times in the past 30 minutes. And he actually, instead of taking that feedback as thank you, he took that feedback as very harsh and pushed back on me and thought that, I was paying attention to the wrong things instead of his skill. And I was like, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be harsh. I was just trying to give you that feedback. So that's the flip of this too, is if you do get some feedback from somebody, recognize maybe why it's coming to you. Recognize that it's not always harsh, but meant hopefully to help, right? And there's, I think I've shared this with you guys in the past. It's some great advice we received about when you say things. Is it kind? Is it helpful? And is it necessary? So when we take that feedback, think about, is it kind? Is it helpful? And is it necessary? Think about that before we share feedback sometimes too. I'm a master of saying things to my kids and having my daughters in particular say to me, was it necessary? So was it helpful? So is it kind? Is it necessary? And is it helpful?
Well, find an accountability partner. Like you said, not necessarily on an interview, but who's that person in your office or in the home or your friend that you can actively work on this with? Because it is distracting. It does water down impact. And there's a lot of articulate people that just have that when they pause or to soften statements. So by taking that out, makes you that much more impactful.
Absolutely. And being saying what we mean and meaning what we say is another phrase to think about with this. But it also comes when people are uncomfortable. We find ourselves uncomfortable at times, and then we start to stammer more, or we start to use more of the filler language. So how could we address that? How do we address the comfort issue? I don't mean to oversimplify this, but be comfortable, right? Like, I don't mean to make light of that, but why are you uncomfortable? So if you find yourself, if you're a salesperson and you find yourself on prospecting calls or in first meetings using more filler language than normal because of your level of being uncomfortable, then we have to go back and ask ourselves, this is where we dive inward, where we start to examine why and say, okay, why am I uncomfortable? Is it because I feel like I don't know my product well enough? Is it because I feel like I don't know their business well enough? I don't feel like I know the process well enough. I don't feel like I know the sales process well enough. If these are all things that are possibilities and you start to ask yourself the whys, one of the common examination methods, I've heard in the past are the 5 whys. Why do I do this? Why am I uncomfortable? Why does that make me uncomfortable? Why do I feel? So you just keep asking yourself whys, right? And you go inward. Ask yourself, why is it that I'm getting uncomfortable? And then work on that. And just as Jesse says, if it's because you're unprepared, prepare, right? And because these are things we can control. These are controlling the things we can control. And get more comfortable with whatever it might be, whether it's the sales process, whether it's their information, whether it's our own product.
Well, let's flip that for a second. So when we're uncomfortable, we might use that language. What about if we're selling and then the prospect, all of a sudden we talk about budget and they're like, well, I think because we can pick up on that too. So as a salesperson, how do we cut through that? And here I am trying not to use filler language today. How do we cut through that and make it more comfortable when we notice that on the opposite end of the spectrum?
Well, I think it depends on the individual that you are. For me, when I notice that, I become more empathetic. And just naturally, I become more empathetic because no one wants to see someone suffer. No one wants to see someone else be uncomfortable. And, for me, I'd probably be rather direct in that moment and say, seems like this is the first time you're thinking about this. Or it seems like this is new to you. And give them that freedom to think, because I think when you see other people doing that, they're doing it for the same reasons we just talked about, because they're uncomfortable, but they don't want to appear to be unknowledgeable, or they don't want to appear to be out of the loop. They don't want to appear to be at a disadvantage. So letting them know it's okay if this is the first time they've thought about this, or it's okay if this is new to them, gives them that freedom to relax and be in the moment a little more.
What about, it seems like I might have offended you. And that's in extreme cases, but what about just being direct and did something that I say happened to offend you, or it seemed like that struck you, or because I'm thinking about just a few in particular people that we coach. And, what you would do, and you're very bold and very direct after all the years of really honing that. But
I think Matt just called me old.
I said all the years and great experience. But what about someone that wants to soften a little bit, that they're not necessarily on that level yet? Because I think this is important, that as we get better asking tougher questions, more direct questions, questions that truly get us into discovery, some salespeople are afraid of how that might make another person feel.
Yeah, so let's step back and let's say, okay, what makes us a great communicator? I think what makes us a great communicator is someone who's authentic. So, as I've grown older, as Matt so kindly...
Wiser.
Yeah, as Matt is
Sorta.
now...
Kinda.
Matt's fishing for euphemisms now for old. But as I've grown older, I've become more confident in the way I see myself because I've taken off a mask. Where when I was younger, I thought I had to be something different, right? I thought I had to be, I just said right, by the way. I thought I had to be someone different. I thought I had to project more confidence, right? Or project that I was someone different than I actually was. And it's here over the past few years or maybe decade that I've become more comfortable being authentic and letting people see who I am, because I've come to realize we all have flaws. We're all imperfect. So once you embrace the fact you don't have to be perfect, that you suffer from this condition called being a human, it allows you to be more authentic. And I think the more authentic we can be, the more comfortable we can be in our communication. So the first thing, the way to do that, I think before you can do that, you have to be authentic to yourself and feel authentic in those situations. And then if you see somebody who is agitated or anxious, which is another way that people process stress. Some people process those stressful selling situations as anxiety or stress, right? Or frustration, bordering on anger. So if we notice that, it's okay to say to somebody, I'm sorry if I said something to offend you. It seems like I might have upset you. And more often than not, you'll get somebody saying, oh, no, I'm sorry. This situation has me frustrated. We've been trying to fix it. For however long, and they actually will connect with you through that. So, but I'm a big fan of calling out elephants in the room, right? I mean, I don't like beating around the bush. I like to call out the elephant in the room. I like to point our attention on the thing that everybody's worried about or is frustrating, yet nobody wants to talk about.
Yeah, leave it to you to find the elephant in every room.
That's right. Well, we got to break some eggs to make omelets some days, and I'm pretty good at that, I think. That's my gift, is addressing confrontation.
So it's awareness. Perhaps you look at a video of yourself, record yourself. We all have iPhones. Go through that. Find an accountability partner and just work on it. Slow down, pause, be okay with silence. And then if it's okay with you, I don't want to skip any points that you have, but just touch on some of this language that might not be filler, but more often. Usually, there's a lot of opportunities as salespeople that we let that go. We let that happen, and we might find ourselves at a proposal draft review with the wrong scope or the wrong idea, or worse yet, after the proposal draft review, and they said, well, we wanted more, or we're willing to pay more, or we wanted a lot of this, a little of that. What does all of that mean? So when we're communicating, let's be clear, but more importantly, if we hear that from a prospect, we have to be okay to say, okay, you want some more. Tell me exactly what that means.
Tell me about more.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's more mean to you? Right? And it's okay to ask that type of question if you do it in a non-abrasive way, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what's more mean to you?
This usually happens.
Tell me more about that.
Mm-hmm.
I assumed we were in role play.
Well, it was just such a good response.
When you say tell
I
me
got
more.
stiff arm. No.
Yeah, no, but see, that's an example of how we don't have to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be comfortable, right? And when Matt said this usually happens, my natural response to that was, well, tell me more about that.
Help me understand that.
Yeah, I don't know what this is, I don't know what usually means. I don't know what. So tell me more. Make it a little more clear for me so that I can do something with it. Because after all, sales is something we do for somebody, not to somebody. What's that mean? That means I'm showing up today to help you solve a problem. And I can't solve a problem if I don't know the scope. I can't solve a problem if I don't know what you're trying to convey to me. So if we think about precision, right? And when we're speaking precision, don't always use the adjective like he, her, all the, you get into all these pronouns and adjectives and everything. Well, how does somebody know who I'm talking about if there's 2 or 3 people involved, right? Versus using just someone's name, as easy as that might be. Instead of saying exactly what you mean, we sometimes rely on the phrase, know what I mean. No, I don't know what you mean. I don't. Help me understand more, right? And, and we don't need to tell somebody what you're saying right now makes you sound stupid, but because that's not helpful and it's not necessary and it certainly wasn't kind. But we do need to ask them, well, tell me more about that. I'm confused, so that we can get to some clarity, so that we have clarity on both sides, right? So we have clarity on our side that we can take away that problem, and we give them the freedom to communicate in a very comfortable, relaxed way.
So as a takeaway, some homework, what are the filler words that you use or phrase, and when do you do it?
And one thing you said, Matt, that's very powerful is about we don't see ourselves enough. I don't think we hear ourselves enough either. So, going back to episodes and episodes ago, one of our homework was call yourself and leave yourself a voicemail that you would leave if you were cold calling. And I think it's important for us to all do that. Leave yourself a message. If you're someone that's doing a lot of prospecting, call yourself and leave yourself a voicemail. If you're in a Teams meeting with somebody, even if it's just your internal colleagues, maybe video one so that you can go back and watch it. And you not only hear the filler language you use, but you can see some of the facial expressions you make and some of the body language you use. That is also part of the impact of that communication.
This was tough. I was trying not to use filler language, but I still use filler language.
I don't know. I think you do a pretty good job. Matt's become a good communicator over the years. I think that's because Matt cares. Matt wants to be a better communicator. Matt's focused on calling himself out when he uses filler words. He's been very good at being an accountability coach for me on that. I remember one time he came into me, and he didn't say it as kind as I might have liked him to, because Matt doesn't always
think
have.
I'm so mean.
Well, you are, but Matt doesn't always have velvet on the hammer, so sometimes he just hammers nails down. But he shared with me all that good stuff that I fell into a trap years ago of using the phrase "and all that good stuff." What does that mean? Where does that come from? And here I am, someone who is intentional about the way I communicate, and I fall into these traps as well. So don't be hard on yourself. We're human. We want to be better, which is why we try to fish for words sometimes. But spend some time thinking about the words you use, how you communicate, the power of that communication, and find either those phrases that are weakening your impact or the situations that you're falling into that bring you anxiety and make you less of a communicator than you should be. All right?
Sounds good.
Great. We'll see you back next week. We appreciate your time as always. Thanks for being with us, and thanks for listening to us and indulging us today on precision language. And as always, if you have questions, please reach out. We're happy to help. Until we see you next week, take care. God bless.
Bye.